maybe I can start it off by talking about a 300 years old village. Now, this is called Lai Chi Vo Village. It's one of the 600 villages we have in Hong Kong. Or I can say this is the other side of the Hong Kong metropolitan. It's situated in what we call an enclave, meaning it's surrounded by protected areas. Now, you can then imagine it has very high ecological and conservation values because of that. But then on the other hand, it has very limited road access. So in the case of Lai Chi Wo, it's surrounded by country park and the marine park. And how do you get there? Okay, you can hide there from the nearest minibus station, and that would take you 2.5 hours, at least one way. Or you can take a public ferry from Ma Liu Shui in Sha Tin. That takes you 1.5 hours. But then the ferry operates only on Sundays and public holidays. Or you can actually get a water taxi from the Shuttlecock Pier. That takes you only 15 minutes. Only if you have a closed area permit. How many of you here actually had that permit? Of course. So this is where it's located. You know, we are at the number 4. You know, can you see number 4 on the Hong Kong Island side? And Lai Chi Wo is way up there. It's part of Hong Kong still, okay? Although it's very close to the border. Now, talking about the future of sustainability, this village used to have 200 households, managing many hectares of farmlands, growing mainly rice and tangerines. I was told by the villagers there that an annual sales of the Chinese New Year tangerine was enough for them to actually purchase a flat in Kowloon Tong in the 60s. So those were the days. But very soon, these villages like this one here lost their competitive advantages because of the cheaper produce being imported from across the border as well as from overseas. So farmers living in that kind of remote village basically could not earn a decent living anymore. So they moved out. They moved abroad, as well as moving to the urban areas of Hong Kong, simply to get a better paid job, better access to services and facilities, or simply to enjoy a more modernized lifestyles. When the Hong Kong Youth Revitalization Project started in 2013, literally there was no one living in the village. No one. That was not a village that actually has a sustainable future then. Many villages still go back. They go back to upkeep their properties and homes, and they meet on special occasions and festival. But there's no plan for them to go back and live there on a regular, basis. So we then, with the support of HSBC, the local villages, and some NGOs, we worked out an action models. Now, the action model is very important, which I'll tell you about more later on. But these villages, although they are sort of going down the hill, people are moving out, they hold very important sustainability values and capitals, not just for the village themselves, but for the wider Hong Kong society. Take Lai Chi Wo as an example. It has a 300-long history of Hakka culture. So they have their custom, festival, and so on. And then the villages also keep a very nice patch of forest at the back of the village, where tree cuttings is not allowed for hundreds of years. You can pick the firewood from the ground, but you cannot cut the trees there. Now, because of that, the forest and the trees have kept the soil very good, so that the soil are capable of absorbing, capturing the rainwater. Gradually, then these rainwater go back to the stream. The village has never really used any tap water. They've always used their local water. Now, the forest, or what we call the Feng Shui wood now, is now recognized by the government as a special area because it has more than 100 local native plant species just within that small patch of area. And this is one of those. Okay? So all these provide the ecosystem services, not just to the villages, but for the wider Hong Kong society, every one of us, because of the fresh air and clean water that we have. Now, then these capitals are important. We have to then safeguard them. So we have the revitalization project kickstarted in 2013. And of course, we started off by reactivating the farmlands. Now, the farmlands was challenging. The farmlands with us is, the villages used to manage many hectares, but for us it's very difficult. And I'm going to tell you 3 stories that explain what is sustainability or the secret of sustainability. The first story is about opening up of the farmland there. Now, the farmland there, because it was idle for 40 years, so it's outgrown by many trees and shrubs. And I'm not sure if you know, but cutting trees down in Hong Kong can be a very sensitive action to do. So especially in a location very close to the country park. So what we have done is we first have our Hong Kong U ecologist working out a plant survey. So we take stock of every single trees in the farmland, and we know what are there, what should be conserved, or what can be transplanted. With those data, we then talk to as many local green groups as possible. We told them our plans to open up the field again, but then we're not messing up the place because the best ecological values is maintained. And after that, we've liaised with the government department. Now, the department in charge in this case is the Agricultural, Fisheries and Conservation Department. So what we've talked to them about is that we asked them if there's any individual citizens calling up to their hotline, trying to launch a complaint because they see someone cutting down the trees there. Can you please explain to them there's a program going on and everything's well looked after? And they agreed to help. And of course, we work with our villages, and we have information signage arranged and set up close to the farmland so that everybody, including the visitors, is well informed. Of course, at the end, we survived. Now, the second story to tell, it's about not having community members there. Remember I said earlier on that people moved out. There's only a few of them would like to come back and retire. But as we are doing this revitalization project for the community, not just for the place, there's a huge difference between the two. We need members, we need villages. On the other hand, there are quite a lot of urban populations who want to live in alternative lifestyles. They want to live closer to the nature, but they just don't have the survival skills living in a village like this one. So we set up a scheme preparing for the sort of survival skills such as how to farm, how to repair a farming machinery, or simply how you should behave living in a village. And then the indigenous, as well as these new settlers, they also need to interact. So we also set up another scheme with money and some technical support, and we want them to form partnerships. So we're now very proud to say that there are rural startups working on coffee and ginger and turmeric food processing business now in Lai Chi Wo. They're selling produce in big supermarkets as well as locally in the village. And the startups were formed together by the indigenous and the new settlers there. Now, the third story I'd like to tell is about the engagement of the much wider Hong Kong community. What the Lai Chi Wo community needs is much more than one-off, ad-off support from any one single organization. That we need ongoing and organic socio-economic interactions. Interactions that go beyond tourism activities. After all, we're not building a Disneyland there. So we start engaging specialists from the urban areas, people like artists, artisans, green architects, or even programmers, so that they can come together and create new services and products at the village and go beyond the village. We now have resident artists doing exhibition there on regular basis, and they also offer public workshops. And this particular one is a workshop using soil as the paint, as a soil art workshop for students and children. And we have residence artists there, staying on seasonal basis, interacting with the communities there. Now, the three stories, they're not funny stories, and they're not extraordinary stories. They are simply simple story that tells us what's work. My boss, Professor Danny Lam, the director for the Center for Civil Society and Governance at Hong Kong U, described these kind of collaborations as a collaborative process, harvesting the resources of the community, by the community, and for the community. The first story tells us everybody has to do their bits, but with a shared common goal. The second story tells us that there has to be true partnerships where every one of us share the same amount of opportunities and also risk. The third example or story tells us that there has to be co-creation of new things, new trend, new development, something new. Or you may call it innovations. All three levels are the secret of sustainability. Sustainability is very often defined by the attainment of solidarity, biodiversity, as well as vibrancy, more like a 3-in-1 package. Not many debates talked about how we can actually get there. Beyond technology, beyond even policy, is actually the readiness of the community. It's actually the collaborative culture for community resilience. I often conclude my sustainability class with 9 words. That is getting more, from less, for longer, and for all. But tonight, I'd like to conclude for the future of sustainability with 13 words. That is from less, for longer, for all, and by all of us. Thank you.